Atari was one of the biggest gaming companies in history. They led the gaming industry into what it is today, either with or without consequences. Creating Pong, creating the Atari 2600, making a bunch of their developers sick of working there that they'd go on to create Activision. But hello everybody, GameBoy here. In today's video, I'm going to discuss what if the Atari Jaguar wasn't a failure. So sit back and relax and enjoy the video. Thank you. Atari was one of the most successful companies in the video game industry, being the pioneer in the early days of video games. But Atari was now a shell of their former glory. After the video game crash of 1983, Atari was unstable. Atari lost a lot of money and they were forced to lay off many employees. Atari was also no longer the top dog in the gaming market, losing that position to Nintendo. Atari's latest gaming console, the Atari 7800, was unsuccessful in the market, being behind both Sega's Master System and Nintendo's Entertainment System. Atari's management really wanted to rebuild their video game empire and put themselves back on top. So Atari decided to get working on a new console, one that would rip Nintendo and Sega to shreds. In 1988, Atari started development on a 32-bit system called the Atari Panther, which was being co-developed by Flare Technologies, and was to release in 1990, alongside the competition of Nintendo's Super Nintendo and Sega's Genesis. But alongside the development of the Panther, the Jaguar itself was starting development in 1989, using the hardware from the Flare 2 and was planning to release in 1992. Atari at this point was now starting to realize that both the Panther and the Jaguar were going to be released relatively close to each other, and would cost a lot to develop and market for both systems. So Atari decided to cancel development on the Panther to focus on the 64-bit Jaguar. During the Consumer Electronics Show in 1991, Atari revealed to the world that they were developing a 64-bit system called the Atari Jaguar, and that it would release around 1993. Finally, in 1993, Atari released the Jaguar into the wild, and it did not perform well. The Atari Jaguar in the first year of release only sold 17,000 units, and by the end of 1994, Atari only sold 100,000 units. In 1995, Atari needed to get their head in the game, and they announced a price drop and that they would release a CD add-on for the Jaguar in the later part of 1995. To be honest, the Atari Jaguar looked like a CD-based console because of the circle in the middle, but it is apparently a cartridge-based system. Atari also decided to halt productions on its various other products and push all the resources to the Jaguar. Atari was getting desperate, knowing that if the Jaguar fails, then the whole company collapses. And not to mention that both the Sega Saturn and the Sony PlayStation were both out and competing against each other in the market. When the Atari CD released and it didn't help console sales, Atari's management agreed to stop supporting the Jaguar and focus back on its other projects. The Atari Jaguar was discontinued in 1996, only selling around 150,000 units. The Atari Jaguar was Atari's last hope to bring them back into the spotlight, but it ultimately ended Atari's career in the console market, never making consoles again. The Atari Jaguar had many reasons why it failed. One reason was developing for the Jaguar. The Jaguar was a powerful console at the time, having two dual 32-bit chips called Tom and Jerry, which would each do their part in running the Jaguar. Many developers didn't understand how to program games via the two chips and worked with what they were used to. By going this route, developers missed an opportunity to have more power within their games. But even if the developers understood how to work with the Jaguar's hardware, the development kits were a real pain to work with. This is from the fact that Atari didn't have the resources available to develop these kits, and this would stall development on games. One of the biggest reasons why the Jaguar failed was the lack of games. The Jaguar had a total of 63 games, 13 of which came from the Atari CD. Comparing that to Atari's competition, the 3DO Interactive Multiplayer had over 200 games produced for that system. And games that did come out for the Jaguar were unimpressive, and only a few games were worth playing for the system. The Atari CD add-on for the Jaguar was kind of a scam. The Atari CD cost $149 for an add-on that didn't even work properly. Which is such a shame because, like the Sega CD, this would have opened up more storage space on the system, allowing more games to have more storage. And not to forget that the Atari Jaguar has the worst designed controller in all of gaming. Like, look at this thing. Why would you add a number pad to your controller? But those are the reasons why the Atari Jaguar failed. To simplify how these issues are fixed, I presume that developers are educated on how to develop for the system and have more experience with it. This in turn would bring in a broader game library and games that could be worth buying the system. The Atari CD would need more development time, and with proper funding, the CD add-on would run smoothly. This would help developers considerably store more data in their games, leading to larger games. This would improve sales of the Jaguar, in turn making the money which Atari needed. This would also guarantee that Atari would continue to be a player in the video game market, which they abandoned after the failure of the Jaguar, which in this timeline wouldn't happen. So with the changes out of the way, let's see what happens to the Jaguar in this new future. So the Atari Jaguar would be released to the public in 1993. At first, the Jaguar would struggle against its competition because of the lack of games. But after the development of a few titles, the Jaguar would start making sales. The Jaguar would get positive reviews by critics, being called the most powerful system of the generation. Many third-party developers would create games for the system due to the extra power of the dual chips. Many games would be 3D, but a handful would still be 2D. Many players would be amazed at the 3D capabilities of the console. With many developers having more knowledge on the system, the game library for the Jaguar would be huge and would release many games, more in our own timeline. This would help the system grow in popularity, specifically in North America. The Atari Jaguar would be competing against Nintendo's Super Nintendo and Sega's Genesis. The Jaguar would give both systems a run for their money and would hold a good portion of the market share. This would be further tightened with the ad campaign, showing off the might and power of the 64-bit Jaguar compared to the small 16-bit Super Nintendo and Genesis. But around 1994, the Jaguar would be in a strong third place, with the Genesis being in second and the Super Nintendo in first. The Jaguar would have scared Nintendo and Sega with the power of the system, leading them to start development on their own 32-bit or 64-bit system. In 1995, Sony would enter the gaming ring with the PlayStation. The entrance of Sony would stress Atari out, and would further stress when Sega would release the Saturn. Atari faced off against Sega and Sony in the market, while Nintendo was working on their own 64-bit system. The Jaguar, now with the released CD add-on, would manage to hold out in the market, but would inevitably struggle against the more powerful PlayStation and Saturn. And when the Nintendo 64 would release in 1996, Jaguar sales would go down considerably. While the Jaguar was in the market, Atari's management decided to start research and development on a new console. The console would be a successor to the Jaguar, being called the Atari Tiger. The Tiger would be more powerful, and graphics-wise, probably comparable to the Dreamcast. The Tiger would be the first Atari console to use CDs rather than cartridges. And around 1999, the Tiger would be released to the public. Microsoft would soon enter the gaming market with the Xbox, making Atari and Microsoft the only two American first-party developers. In 2001, the Atari Tiger would compete against the Nintendo GameCube, the Xbox, and the PlayStation 2 in the sixth generation of video games. The Jaguar would discontinue around 1999, being a 6-year-old console which lived a pretty good game life, having good games and good market share. But it will be the legacy of the Jaguar that matters. The Jaguar will go down in Atari's history as the console that saved Atari. After the Jaguar failed in our timeline, Atari left the gaming market, but with the success of the Jaguar, Atari would continue to produce consoles. For the distant future, Atari would be a major player in the gaming industry, facing their rivals Nintendo, Sony, and Microsoft. Atari would create more consoles and more games, and even have a chance in the handheld field. Atari would bring new ideas in the gaming space, making gaming more fun and interesting than what it already is. But that's my take on what if the Atari Jaguar wasn't a failure. Thank you so much for watching this video. If you enjoyed this video, then please consider leaving a like. If you want to see more what if scenarios, then please subscribe. If you have any thoughts on this video, then please comment down below. If you haven't seen any of my other what if scenarios, please consider checking them out. That's all for today, and I'll see you in the next video. See ya!